TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We're all about the news, talk, information, entertainment, and sports that drivers want to hear about. You know, there's so much going on in the trucking industry today, and drivers and owner-operators need advocates to navigate all these waters. James Lamb is the executive director and founder of the Small Business and Transportation Coalition. That's a nonprofit industry trade group which operates under the domain of truckers.com. In addition to being a trucker and small business advocate, James is a firebrand for trucker gun rights. He's the founder of Truckers Lives Matter. James has also been associated with the transportation industry since 1993 when he became a New York DOT motor carrier investigator. He's a guest instructor at Houston Community College for truck driver training, and he's been a guest columnist in trucking magazines and guest speaker at all the major truck shows. James produced a trucking trade show and regularly appears on trucking-oriented radio. Welcome, James. You've got quite a background there. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, good afternoon, Shelley and Tom in the background there in the control booth. And thanks for having me on board here today.
I really appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, could you give us maybe a brief history of your involvement in the trucking industry?
Yeah, I think it goes back, like you said, to sometime around 1993 or so, back when I took a civil service exam, and lo and behold, next thing you knew, I was out there on, the side of the road doing road checks, compliance audits in companies' offices, and investigating consumer complaints, usually moving complaints. So it goes back to, early 90s, and as you said, I've kind of gone the full gamut, doing all sorts of, different things in the industry.
You certainly have worn a lot of hats. What got you to become an advocate for the industry?
Well, one of the things that I've done in my career is I've built up a, for-profit side business, and that business was basically a consulting firm that helped folks, go into the industry. Usually it was a company driver who was thinking about, going off on his own and buying a truck, getting his own operating authority. So, we would do all those types of permitting applications for those types of folks. And after a while, after we put, thousands and then tens of thousands, and then we reached the 100,000 mark of people that we got DOT numbers for and MC numbers, we realized that, there really was a void in there in terms of creating a trade group that was for all the small players in the transportation industry. So, at first we looked at brokers, and then we looked at small trucking companies as well. And rather than create something that was already created and reinvent the wheel, like OIDA and all that kind of stuff, we basically had said, well, whereas one group usually pits itself and its membership against other groups, trucker versus broker, things of that nature, we said, we need a group that really fosters the idea of partnerships and, working together in cooperation, and rather it being us versus them, thinking of it as, we're all in this together, and we all need to kind of support each other, no matter what our role is in the transportation industry. And so we kind of zeroed in on a different us versus them, and that really became small business versus larger entities that we had witnessed, over the years, typically trying to get the edge over their smaller business competition. And, a lot of things would happen that we just didn't agree with in the industry. And we said representation needs to be, put into place for actors across various different modes, and basically, for the smaller entities in the industry.
Absolutely. You have one unified voice. It's a lot louder for sure, and you get people's attention, which sometimes that's difficult to do with politicians, isn't it?
Oh, it sure is. The lobbied interests usually, a squeaky wheel gets the grease, if you will. And I guess that's a pun on what kind of grease. But, it really is difficult, having, a group that's predominantly, small business folks and folks who are lower income, in terms of, being working class. And really, these are people who feel like they're not represented well and that, they really need a strong voice in Washington. So we have a team of lawyers and lobbyists, that we've put into place that walk the halls of Capitol Hill and also goes into federal court when need be if we see that there's any evidence of, anti-competitive practices or any type of rule or regulation that we feel should be contested on the basis that it's really the big boys in the industry that are getting the ears of the, the regulators and the small people need their voice heard too.
Excellent. So there's so many things going on we hear on the news. What do you see as the biggest issues confronting drivers and owner-operators today in the industry?
Well, with the change in administration here now, it's a whole new ballgame, as you know. And, we're up against, quite a bunch of different challenges. This infrastructure bill, $2.25 trillion. And, Shelley, when we start throwing around the word trillion, I really want your listeners to think about that. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollars. Think about that. So, we're talking about 2.25 and somebody put out a cute little chart, and it's kind of floated around social media. You probably saw it. And it's a little pie chart. And basically it says, and approximately 6% of that actually goes to infrastructure, like, roads and bridges and highways and things like that. And so, we're concerned about the typical, given the fact that we're representing mostly small businesses and our members have a conservative, tilt to them in general. We're concerned about this notion of let's go tax and spend and, spend some more and then tax some more. It seems to be that's the way this administration is going here. And, so that's a big problem. And then within that bill, and, today there was a hearing at the T&I committee and basically they disclosed infrastructure markup is going to come out probably now in May. And so, we have our inside sources and all, and we know that PRO-ACT is now a part of that. And that's a big...
it's part of the infrastructure bill now?
Yeah, it's been attached now. And it reminds me of back in the day when Bob Voltman and TIA got the broker bond that they were trying to get passed in both the Senate and the House as standalone legislation and failed miserably. They got Harry Reid to attach it to the, the highway bill at that point. So that's how this stuff typically goes. It gets attached and then it gets kind of snuck in. And, to quote a famous member of Congress who I will not name, we have to pass the bill in order to read it, find out what's in it. So,
okay.
That's the problem with that. And boy, that PRO-ACT, that B prong in the ABC test, we are so concerned about that. And I know other groups are in trucking as well, in terms of definition of employer versus independent contractor and the impact of that definition, on the definition of the traditional definition of independent contractor. We're worried about leased owner operators now all of a sudden being, told they're not really independent. They are in fact employees. Mm-hmm. And so they will lose their tax, benefits as a business owner and
all their write-offs, correct?
Oh yeah. All the write-offs are gone at that point. And then all the, the companies that now have to take them on as employees, first of all, what are they going to do with their truck? You got to sell your truck or you got to get your own authority at that point, take the next, leap. But,
which is huge in terms of expense, isn't it?
It is, especially since they're talking about in a highway bill, putting in the insurance increase. That's allegedly going to happen too. So, when we look at that, it's a nightmare. And even though, that has to do with this concept of right to organize, these bills have a potential to have an impact on, other tzstatutes, common law interpretations of what an independent contract. It opens up a can of worms, Pandora's box. And ultimately, if we start to go down that path and we start to make the B prong, which is basically, if you're engaged in a business and it's the same type of business as the person you're contracting with, you're an employee, that's a nightmare scenario. Because now
it really is.
Yep.
All of a sudden, all these people, what would they do? They would have to sell their truck or take on that ridiculous, expense that is coming down the pike. So,
James, we have to go to break here. I want to cover this more in detail when we come back. I mean,
Sure.
This is just so unbelievable. We're talking with James Lamb, trucking industry advocate and founder of the Small Business and Transportation Coalition. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. Definitely stay tuned for more great information coming up. Every day, the roads are full of semis. Truck drivers are responsible for nearly 80% of America's freight. Being a truck driver is not an easy job, and it isn't for everyone. Trucking can be hard on a person, both physically and mentally. Suffering from mental health issues can put truck drivers in a dangerous situation. To safely operate a heavy-duty vehicle, drivers need to be physically and mentally healthy. Mental health issues are common in truck drivers. Here are the 4 common mental health issues truck drivers face. Truck driving is a demanding job. It can be very stressful at times. A stressful work environment leads to anxiety and depression. In addition to stressful work environments, truck drivers spend a lot of time alone in their truck. Constantly being alone can affect one's mental health. Although many truck drivers suffer from mental health issues, some are afraid to get help because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration requires drivers to be in good health before receiving or renewing a commercial driver's license. The trucking industry is predominantly male. A study by RAHM states that men are less likely to get treatment for their mental health than women. It's important for drivers to take care of their mental health as much as their physical health. Common mental health issues can include depression. Depression is an illness that affects you mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's very common in the trucking industry. Being alone and away from friends and family contributes to depression. It's important to know the difference between feeling down and having depression. If you feel you're experiencing depression, seek out help. Depression is serious and can affect your ability to operate your truck. Anxiety. Because of how stressful trucking can be, anxiety is very common for drivers. It's especially true for new drivers. Even experienced drivers have reported having anxiety and panic attacks while on the road. It's important to know the difference between new driver anxiety and generalized anxiety. If you're experiencing anxiety often while working, take the necessary steps to get help. Chronic sleep disturbances. A good night's rest is crucial to truck drivers. Not having enough sleep can make it dangerous to operate a heavy-duty vehicle. Because of a truck driver's living and work situation, good sleep can be difficult. An NCBI study reports that 20 to 28.6% of truck drivers have unspecified sleep disorders, and 27.5% of truck drivers are diagnosed with insomnia. Sleep is extremely important for your mental and physical health. If you're experiencing problems sleeping while trucking, consider seeking professional help. Loneliness. Truck drivers spend many days and weeks isolated in their truck. According to Business Insider, nearly a third of drivers say being alone is a significant issue affecting their mental health. If you're experiencing loneliness on the road, check out the blog from the Truckers Network, Mental Health Tips for Trucker.
In normal times, 11 million children go hungry every day in America. But these aren't normal times. The coronavirus pandemic has sent unemployment soaring, Without paychecks, millions of families can't afford to buy food. You can join the urgent fight against hunger. Now's the time to text RADIO to 662266, and a donation link will be sent immediately to your phone. You can also donate at radiocares.org.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and today we're chatting with James Lamb, a trucking industry advocate and executive director and founder of the Small Business and Transportation Coalition. James, before we went to break, you were talking about the PRO Act, which has been conveniently snuck into the infrastructure bill. How will this impact owner-operators? There's so much detail we couldn't get to in the last segment. Could you explain the PRO Act? What does it do?
Yeah, essentially, it's entitled, protecting the right to organize. So it's really all about, collective bargaining, and it's about being able to join a union. And really, the people who are behind the PRO Act are the people who run the unions. And really, it's a one big union recruitment drive. They're looking to represent these folks. And it's funny because I'm going at it. If you follow us on Twitter, I'm on Twitter as handle Real James Lamb. And so if you look at that, or the SBTC account, the SBTC, we're going at it with some folks in the unions, and we're a trade group. And so we are a 501c6 business league, tax exempt organization, nonprofit, and unions are 5. So we're 6 and they're 5. And it's like there's a competition to represent folks. Now, we don't represent folks with respect to collective bargaining. We're not going to engage in coordinating strikes and things like that. Quite frankly, I'm not a fan of strikes because it's essentially economic, terrorism. I always tell people when they're talking about shutting down, on the road or doing slow rolls, I say, we don't want to be involved with that. First of all, we can't. And second of all, we're just not going to be involved in preventing America's children, babies, from getting their baby formula, and the elderly from getting their heart medication. So we're distinctly different, but both types of organizations charge membership fees. Like we charge a $50 membership fee for truckers to be represented by us, but we're representing them really in the the context of the the government, lobbying for rules and regulations that are pro-business and that protect the interests and promote the interests of small business players in the industry. The problem here is that the PRO Act, what it does is it tries to take owner-operators, specifically leased owner-operators. So now here we have to define what a trucker is, right, real quick. And we say there's a company driver, there's a leased owner-operator, and then there's an independent owner-operator who's basically a one-man carrier with his own authority and or larger size, carriers. So what it does is it zooms in really on this middle group of leased owner-operators, and if it's extended beyond just the scope of what this law is, which is what we're worried about, the IRS starts to adopt this B prong and this ABC test, and Department of Labor does. In that case, then we're headed in the direction of the total collapse and demise of the leased owner-operator model. And that's what all the trucking groups are basically saying. And quite frankly, it's the big trucking groups like ATA, OIDA, SBTC on the smaller side. We're all in agreement, which happens very rarely, that this is bad for the trucking industry because it opens up this door and it sets a precedent. And quite frankly, it will set up a statute that now is, basically in contrast to how the IRS typically interprets who's an employee and who's a independent contractor. And it sets up the potential for what's called conflict of law lawsuits, where the judge, basically has a plaintiff come to him and say, the plaintiff says, what am I? According to the PRO Act, I'm an independent owner-operator. According to the IRS, I'm an employee. Like, what am I? I don't understand. Judge, you tell us what we are. And then, of course, that then sets common law. And so this is just a nightmare scenario. And like I said, for people who are leased owner operators, you should really be, yelling and screaming at your members of Congress, at your representatives in the Senate, and you should be saying, hey, don't do this. Because if you do this B prom, pass the statute, that's fine, but just remove that B prom, because that is going to hook us in, or pass the thing, but make truck drivers, carve us out. Make that an exception. It doesn't apply to owner-operators. So that's what we're trying to get folks to do, because this could really have a devastating impact on the whole thing. And, we see President Biden coming in 2 months ago, and now all of a sudden the Department of Labor was about to rule in a new regulation on what an independent contractor is as opposed to a employee. And they've just totally stopped that rule that was about to come out. They put the brakes on it because the administration, it appears, wants to go in this direction of empowering unions, helping unions get more, membership dues and recruit more people that really, quite frankly, at least in our membership, don't want to be a member of the union because they don't consider themselves an employee. And quite frankly, they're not. They're not a company driver.
Now, what if the owner-operators an LLC? Would they have protection under that?
That's a good question, and it depends on which lawyer you talk to, as to whether, that's the case. It looks like that will be a strategy if this goes, through, in totality, where there will be an attempt to do that. But there's reason to believe that, you can pierce that corporate shield, as we like to say, because if you're so closely held and, you're really, just a driver who, has been in business for himself, lending your truck and, you're leasing your truck and your labor onto a carrier, you're working under that carrier's authority, their license. In that case, the other side is going to say, nope, doesn't matter if you're a corporation or an LLC, it's not what you call yourself, it's what you do and how the law applies to what you do. So, that probably will be used for a while, but then again, there will be all this money spent on these lawsuits, to try to see if there's any wiggle room to get out of this.
Well, I could see it really decimating an owner-operator who's been set up, who's purchased the truck. Yes, they're leasing it back, but they've got all of these expenses they can't write off, but they still have the debt. So, oh my goodness, what an expense.
Yeah. So that means that, it's kind of like you're in a situation where all of a sudden, like, your house got foreclosed because you're not going to have the income coming in. You still have the lease on the, the truck. And, it's, your note on the truck anyway. And basically you have only one choice. It's either sell the truck and cash out,
right.
Or, go find another type of job. You can drive a company truck, that's what they want. And you can become a member of the union. Hey, that's a great idea, right? That's what that side says.
Yeah.
The other side is, well, if you can't beat them, or if you can't, let's do the reverse. If you can't join them, beat them, right? So what you're doing is you're going to compete with those carriers by getting your own operating authority. Exactly. So a minute ago, you were operating under their authority. Now you're in competition with them, but that all is contingent upon what they do with raising the insurance. And, that's really these issues and really speak to why there needs to be a group that represents, the smaller interests. And there's, other groups that are out there like us that do that, but really, we go to bat for both. If it's small brokers that are under attack by big brokers, we go to bat for them. If it's small, owner-operators trying to get pushed out, out of business by raising their insurance, we go to bat for them. Somebody has to look out for the little guys is what we do.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly. James, can I put you on the spot a little bit here? You've described to us, what could happen here. Take a look in your crystal ball. What do you think will happen? And I'm not going to hold you to it and bring you back 6 months from now and say, see, told you were wrong. Just your thoughts today, and I'm guessing it changes every day, but your thoughts today as to how you think this is going to end up playing out.
Well, the PRO Act passed the House, and it was sent over to the Senate as standalone legislation. So, on the House side, it's really a matter of, getting the 60, or I should say on the Senate side, it's really a matter of getting the 60 votes to defeat the filibuster, or, they have to, conclude that they're going to waive that through the parliamentarian, and they've started to go in that direction. As if this was a budgetary, expense, and so there's going to be a fight over that. But just attaching it to the infrastructure bill now, that makes it a whole other ball game. And really, it's a matter of, if the House passes it again through, the larger legislation, and the Senate, doesn't through conference committee eliminate it, then, we got a real problem, because it's going to set a precedent. It's going to set a tone. And, I could see that, once the IRS sees this, even though the statute does not necessarily specifically instruct the IRS to do anything, there's no language that prohibits the IRS from adopting this formula. There's other things in the statute, that the proposed statute that will instruct other agencies not to use it. The states can't use, the interpretation. It says you can't construe it such and such way, but they don't say that about the IRS. They don't say the IRS cannot follow this. And the IRS has been dealing with this, for decades, this issue. And now here's something that comes right out of Congress, and they can say, you know what, Congress has kind of spoken on this issue, maybe not necessarily in the context of the Revenue Act of 1978, but, for all intents and purposes, we can kind of take a hint from Congress as to what we should do. And so now they can do something, and now they can through preemption authority, tell the states what a independent contractor is. And that's what we're worried about. We're worried about what happens after this happens, what the ramifications are and the fallout is. And this just opens, you said, Shelley, slippery slope. And boy, that says it all right there. That's what this is. We're going to be slipping and sliding downhill. We don't know at what point, we're going to stop and when it breaks the fall.
Oh, sure. And anytime the IRS gets involved, they think taxes, nothing else.
Right. That's right.
So you're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. We'll have more with James Lamb coming up. Definitely stay tuned.
This info blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Mental health resources for truck drivers. Truck drivers are the backbone of America. They're the unsung heroes. Nearly every good consumed in the United States has been transported in a truck. Because of how challenging truck driving is, truck drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers will have among each other. The truth is, truck drivers are human. They have their emotional and mental struggles, just like every other working American. The only difference is that truck drivers face unique factors that put them more at risk for depression and other serious mental health issues. According to the Transport Workers Union, 1 in 5 truck drivers has experienced mental health issues. Depression and anxiety are the top mental issues that truck drivers face. Mental health resources for truck drivers. With truck drivers spending more time on the road than at home, it can be difficult to get help for their mental health struggles. Now, thanks to modern-day technology, truck drivers can get help right from their smartphones. Esper. Esper is a national behavioral health company with a mission to help people and organizations reach their full potential. Esper offers a continuum of behavioral health care from acute to chronic health conditions to leadership development, including Fit to Pass, a coaching program to assist professional drivers in maintaining good health and pass their DOT recertification physical exams. BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest e-counseling platform. They have access to licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, and board-licensed professional counselors. To get starters, take a quick questionnaire and BetterHelp will match you with a therapist that's right for you. Mutts for Trucks. Mutts for Trucks is an organization that helps truck drivers find the perfect four-legged friend for the road. Their mission is to bring more good to a community that brings so much good to us. It's been proven that owning a dog can drastically decrease isolation, depression, and cardiovascular disease. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a national network of local crisis centers that provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their number is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. If you feel that you need help for your mental health struggles while on the road, we also recommend reaching out to your carrier and seeing what options they may have available for you. For more information on mental health, go to the blog section at The Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hi, this is Tom Kirk from TNCRadio.LIVE. Over 37 million people in America struggle with food scarcity. As the coronavirus pandemic continues, they need your help now more than ever. Feeding America, the nation's largest hunger relief organization, is committed to serving those communities and families facing hunger. You can be there for your neighbors in need by donating now at radiocares.org or text radio to 662266 and we'll send the donation link to your phone.
You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with James Lamb, a trucking industry advocate and executive director and founder of the Small Business and Transportation Coalition. James, you were saying that insurance is another big issue this year, and it could even possibly be added to the infrastructure bill. What's going on with the insurance in transportation, and what's the story on that?
Yeah, well, again, standalone legislation has popped up, quite a few times over the last, few years. I remember 2019, 2020, and basically there's this concept that, the personal injury attorney lobby wants truckers to have more insurance so that they can get higher settlements out of the insurance company. So it's basically all about, personal injury defense. And there was at one point where one of the representatives in Congress that was sponsoring, a bill, their wife was like a, personal injury attorney or something like that. So, it's all sorts of conflict of interest, corruption. Sure. Kind of stuff that's out there, but these are the people that are making the rules. They're making the laws that you are going to have to follow. But so, what they're doing now is it looks like they're going to put it in the highway bill, and we have some inside information on that's their intent. And the question is, how much are they going to raise the insurance? Now, and what we're talking about here is we're not talking about bobtail or anything like that. We're talking about insurance for full-fledged motor carriers. So, let's just make sure everybody's clear, that's maybe not in the industry that is thinking about going in or thinking about getting into their own authority. Right now, you're required to have, if you have vehicles over 10,000 pounds and you're crossing state lines, engaged in the transportation of regulated commodities, you're required to have a minimum of $750,000 worth of trucking, commercial trucking insurance. And that's basically for bodily injury protection and property damage. Mm-hmm. Now, the industry requires typically shippers that hire, trucking companies directly or brokers that are hiring truckers and carriers. The industry really, sets it at $1 million. That's what contractually they want. But the government says it has to be a minimum of $750,000. So people will go and they'll get the $1 million, and that's basically where they're at right now. That's assuming no hazardous commodities. Hazmat, the government requirement is anywhere from $1 million to $5 million, depending on the nature of the hazmat that's being hauled, whether it's low level or high level hazmat. So that's what the government requires now. These bills that have been out there, and one of them we believe is going to be attached to the highway bill, they would increase that insurance from $750,000 anywhere up to $4.5 million. So it's almost like everybody would have to be insured at the level of the highest level of hazmat. $1.5 million. So what that does is it now obviously increases the cost of the individual owner-operator who broke away from being a leased owner-operator, decided to get his own authority. Now he either has his authority or it's a leased owner-operator that was about to go get his authority, and doors are going to be closed. People are going to be shut down and put out of business because they can't make that, next payment that they're going to have to make when this thing goes through the roof, the premiums.
How much could that increase costs?
It's very difficult to tell, and we tried to make those those guesses back when the broker bond was going up, for small brokers, where it was going up from 10,000, they wanted 100,000. In my predecessor group before SBTC, called the AIPBA for brokers, we basically got that lobbied down to 75,000. So in essence, it all depends on what happens in the market. Some insurance companies may say, well, we don't want to write, those policies anymore at that high level because that's too much risk exposure for us. So there may be a shortage of insurance carriers that are willing to to be still in the market. I just had that problem with homeowners insurance where I got a letter saying we're dropping you. I said, why? And they said, well, it's nothing you did. You didn't put any claims in. It's just we're not in that market anymore because it's just not good. Florida is Hurricane City. So
right.
So basically that can happen in trucking, and then there's a problem there. So it's going to go up high. We don't know how high, but obviously higher than it was. And B, a lot of opportunity to get insurance may dwindle away. And then, of course, that can let the insurance companies that remain, set up an oligopoly. And then they can do whatever they want with prices, supply and demand.
Yep.
No choice left, So it tends to be, an absolute nightmare again. So when you couple these two things with, you're going to be redefined as an employee. You can't stay where you are, if this thing goes down the road we think it's going to go. And you can't stay as a leased owner operator. You got to choose left or right, go back and be a company driver and sell your truck, or take on the new insurance premium. This is going to make a lot of people wind up union members. And lo and behold, that might be the agenda that we're seeing, squeezing people so they don't get to start businesses in America again.
That's the lifeblood of America. That's
you're not. So you can't be a capitalist in America. What are you talking about? You can't be an entrepreneur and take on a reasonable amount of risk. We're going to make it so expensive for you to do that if you want to drive a truck for a living, the only thing that you can do is work for a trucking company and join our union and pay our union dues. That's where this is going, and that's despicable.
Yes, and you said the insurance bill could be added to the infrastructure bill to complicate things, and
to the highway bill. So that's
highway bill. I'm sorry. Okay.
Up next.
Wow. It's got to be maddening for an owner operator not knowing where are they headed this year. What do they do? What are they going to be tomorrow when they wake up in the morning?
Well,
and then couple that in with driverless trucks, and oh my gosh. How much time do you really have left?
James, let me ask you this. How much do you think the average owner-operator really understands the issues that are before them right now?
Well, when we hear people talking about this, we send out alerts. We send out alerts to our members first and foremost. And then we start talking about these things, on social media. We tweet. We go on LinkedIn, which is a more business-oriented professional platform. And we stay our spiel there. Facebook, we have our Trucker Lives Matter group on Facebook that you all should, if you're listening, go check out and join. And, we talk about these things there. And drivers typically are like, that's never going to happen. They're not going to do that. This has been around forever, this paradigm of leased owner-operator. Yeah, it's never going to happen. The Democrats control all the important branches of government at this point. So, when we're talking about, the House and essentially the Senate with the vice president, deciding vote, and the presidency. I mean, this stuff can happen, and they're starting off in the first 2 months. They're not playing these people. They want to affect these changes now. They have at least 2 years before the midterms. So they're at work, and y'all should be very concerned about this, because this could have a devastating impact on your current job. We don't know where, a truck driver as an occupation is going to be 5 to 10 years from now. But, we can have that discussion another day, because that's really about the distant future. We're talking about immediate, redefinitions through multiple agencies and interpretations and common law that, within a couple of years, this could be a done deal by the time things may sway back, to the other side of the aisle.
So much to think about. It's a major headache. And to keep it all straight, people want to be drivers. They don't want to have to deal with all this legal stuff, and to try to figure out where are they headed, how's it going to impact them. I think drivers have enough stress.
Yeah, they do. And that's why, although we put out call to action every once in a while, and tell people when something really is important that, they really need to, look at, and they really need to act upon, and make that phone call, send that email. For the most part, there should be a mechanism for them to have representation in the decision-making arena. And, that's Congress, that's the White House, and that's in the U.S. DOT and FMCSA agencies. So they really should think about joining a trade group, and, it can be OIDA, it could be SBTC, it can be any of our other competitors that are out there. But if you're out there and you're not a member of a trade group at this point, you're not supporting the lobbying and the attorney legal team effort. If this happens, you're gonna be sorry, because you're gonna say, there's more I could have done. It's kind of like if everybody, says, my vote doesn't matter. If everybody in the country said that would have a significant impact on the outcome of elections.
Absolutely.
So everybody needs to join a trade group. Pick one. We want you to join SBTC, truckers.com. We're not your grandfather's trade group, we like to say. We haven't been around since 1972, this founder is still alive and kicking here, and we're doing some good stuff. So, right. Membership at smalltransportation.org is our email address. Truckers.com. We're happy to have you as a member.
Wow, James, you've got so much information here. We're going to have a lot more coming up. We're just getting to we're not even scratching the surface right here on TNCRadio.LIVE. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show. Stay tuned. Living life on the road can be exhausting. It's not uncommon for truckers to live inside their truck more than their own home. Other than the essential clothing, hygiene, and sleeping items, here are some items every truck driver needs to make life on the road more pleasant and feel more like home. A seat cushion. Comfort is key when driving for 11 hours each day. Having a seat cushion can help with tailbone and back pain. It's also great for boosting overall mood while driving. A portable stove. Investing in a portable stove is a great way to start eating your favorite meals on the road. Eating the same fast food and gas station food gets old really quick. Before buying a portable cooker, you need to invest in a power inverter. A power inverter allows you to use your vehicle's battery to generate AC that can run many types of electrical devices. Car mount. Having a place to mount your cell phone or GPS can be extremely convenient and much safer for truck drivers. Coffee maker. There's nothing quite like a fresh cup of coffee in the morning. Staying awake and alert is crucial for truck drivers. Dash cam. A dash cam is a must-have gadget for your expensive truck. A high-quality dash cam can save you from many problems while traveling on the road. A cooler. Having a cooler on the road can save time and money. It also provides the option for truckers to eat healthier meals.
Hello, this is Ron Samuels from TNCRadio.LIVE. As the largest hunger relief organization in the United States, the Feeding America network of food banks feeds millions of families each year, especially during times of disasters and national emergencies. With the coronavirus pandemic impacting the entire nation, and the possibility of an impending hunger crisis becoming more likely, Feeding America and all those families who rely on their services need your help now more than ever. You can be there for families and communities in need by donating now at radiocares.org or text radio to 662266 and we'll send the donation link to your phone. In normal times, 11 million children go hungry every day in America. But these aren't normal times. The coronavirus pandemic has sent unemployment soaring. Without paychecks, millions of families can't afford to buy food. You can join the urgent fight against hunger. Now's the time to text radio to 662266 and a donation link will be sent immediately to your phone. You can also donate at radiocares.org.
This is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we've been talking with James Lamb, a trucking industry advocate and executive director of the Small Business and Transportation Coalition. James, gosh, we've talked about quite a few things, and we've barely scratched the surface. I guess what I'd like to do is maybe talk about the Truck Driver Protection Act. You said that you're working on that right now. What is that all about?
Yeah, the Truck Driver Protection Act, is kind of our Plan C, I guess you would call it, over the course of the last 7 years or so. We've been trying to get this legislation passed called Mike's Law, and then we called it New Draft Michael's Law Amendment. And, if you go onto our website, truckers.com, there's an interview with me and the NRA about those former versions of our bill, and we've never really gotten that off the ground because NRA hasn't really backed us, and they're out there pledging their gun reciprocity bill. They're pitching that, and we have a Plan B bill, and they just we just can't seem to come together. So what we've done is we've said if we're going to talk about the need for drivers to be protected, if we can't talk about guns right now because, quite frankly, the people who don't like guns are in power, we need a Plan C here. And so we've now created what we call Beglin's Law. And so Michael Beglin, was a driver who was murdered. As many people know, back in 2014, much like Jason Rivenberg, similar circumstances. So we've been trying to fight, for legislation in his name, various different forms of legislation. So this is our Plan C. And what this does is it basically says, look, in this day and age and these times when there's social unrest and we've got, crazy things going on over the last year, like COVID, coronavirus, and people are just, tearing up the country. And they're doing it right now, the last 3 nights in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, over this latest police shooting. This kid, Dante Wright, was, killed. And so now they're doing it again, just like George Floyd almost a year ago. And, these folks are out there and regardless of whether they're right or wrong, the police are right or wrong, it's destructive and it's endangering the lives of the people who need to supply that community and other communities across the nation. In Seattle, and we've seen it all around, even down to Miami, the last year. So, what we're saying here is that there's something called the Hobbs Act. And the Hobbs Act basically says that it's illegal to interfere with interstate commerce in the event that you do so through violence or threats of violence. So what we've done here at the recommendation of Lena Danko, one of our board members, after meeting with people in the FMCSA and all, and quite frankly, she's gone around to Congress. We basically have formulated a statute proposal, a bill that basically says we have to redefine this. We've got to make it tougher. We've got to make it apply to the victims of this violation of interstate commerce. And who are the victims? The victims are truckers, essentially, or any transportation worker, that's who's engaged in interstate commerce. So, that's basically the essence of this. And, I know we don't have a heck of a lot of time left to chat in detail about this, but, we have posted it on our website. Any driver listening here or any other person can go to truckers.com and you can look, midway down and you'll see the actual text of the bill. We need folks to help us, get that passed. We would like to see that legislation in the highway bill instead of, this nonsense of raising insurance for, one-man truck.
So essentially, how would drivers be able to protect themselves? What does the Beglin's Law do?
So basically what it's doing is it's strengthening the existing statute, and there's a few other things in there, but ultimately what it's doing is it's saying that we need to focus on the people who have been out there, who have been servicing, your communities while you've been at home over the last, year and on and off with shutdowns and all. And ultimately, it's the purpose is basically to identify that when this type of violence happens, there are real victims, and those victims need to be protected in terms of deterrence. You will go to prison for 20 years if you mess with a truck driver who's engaged in a delivery in furtherance of interstate commerce. That's the deterrent factor. And we look at this poor guy who got jammed up back last May and June, Bogdan Bachurko. He's the guy that was hauling the gasoline tanker in Minnesota on the bridge. And all of a sudden he comes over the hill and there's a group of people took over the highway that are interfering with interstate commerce. Right. And he can't stop in time, and they get in front of him, and then he does stop, and they jump on his truck. One guy pulled out a gun and fired the gun after pointing it at his head at the guy's tire. It's a gasoline tank. It's empty, which is worse because of the vapors. It could have blown up, and it could have killed the driver, the gunman, and all of these people who were trying to peacefully protest by illegally, taking over the interstate highway, and there would have been an absolute disaster. So, to protect the public, to protect drivers, the government has to get tougher on enforcing the Hobbs Act. We sued the last secretary, Secretary Chow, for not enforcing the Hobbs Act in that scenario. And the secretary at the time said, well, we don't really have an obligation. We have authority to enforce it, but it's our choice, and we choose not to. That can't stand.
No.
That cannot be America. The bad guys are out there, and they're looting and they're robbing, and they beat this guy up. They beat him up. There's another statute that says you can't beat up a hazmat driver and interfere and take over his truck. Inspector General at USDOT wouldn't do anything after we complained. They're not interested in protecting the truck driver who's out there trying to do his job safely and return home. So Michael Beglin is an example of somebody who went to work one day and never came home. And he never wound up getting to see his daughter, who his wife was pregnant with at the time he was killed. And he missed out on that entire, that entire joy. Yeah. And there are other drivers. 500
tragic
interstate workers killed in the last decade. 500.
Wow. James, you've given us a lot of food for thought here and some valuable information. How do people reach your organization and do some research and reach out to you with questions?
Yeah, like I said, we are on all the social media, Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. My email address is james@truckers.com. Can't forget that, right? And of course, our website is smalltransportation.org or truckers.com.
Excellent. We just scratched the surface, as I was saying when we came back from the last segment. We definitely would like you back because you are a wealth of information, and there's so many things that I think owner-operators and drivers need to be aware of because it's so complicated. And obviously, when you're dealing with laws, they are never easy.
TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Hi, this is Tom Kelly, managing partner of Emsico LLC, doing business as TNCRadio.LIVE. The website TNCRadio.LIVE and any content or podcast related to the website are copyrights of Emsico LLC, copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Any redistribution or reproduction of all or any part of the contents in any form is prohibited other than the following. We welcome you to download and play the publicly available podcast and share with others for personal use. Please acknowledge TNCRadio.LIVE as the source of the material. You may not, except with our express written permission, distribute or commercially exploit the content. And while we endeavor to keep the information up to date and correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind expressed or implied about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the website, the podcast, or the information, products, services, or related graphics contained on the website or podcast for any purpose. Any reliance you place on such information is therefore strictly at your own risk. For additional information, including details regarding monetization of this podcast, send email to podcasts@tncradio.live.